Dodgy voice this morning. I will do my best to project, but if you can't hear and you'd like to move your cushions closer, please do that, because this might be as good as it gets. My colleagues have been spared my voice for about a week and a half, and it's probably been a source of great joy. So in Dogen Zenji's Shobogenzo, there is a chapter called 108 Gates of Dharma Illumination. And I have been looking at this text for a while. I've talked about and written about the first two gates of 108 gates. And today I'm going to talk about the third one. So I've done that speaking and writing in other venues. I've not talked about this here, so this is my first time sharing with you about this text. The chapter, this 108 Gates of Dharma Illumination, is mostly a long quote from another text called the Sutra of Collected Past Deeds of the Buddha. So Dogen Zenji kind of took this thing, set it down inside his 12 Fascal version of Shobogenzo. This doesn't show up in the longer versions of Shobogenzo. It only shows up in the short one. But there is so much material here. It's a lifelong study, really. I think it's a very interesting text. So the first gate in this 108 gates, the first gate is right belief. The second gate is pure mind. And the third gate is delight. So today, we're going to have a delightful talk. We're going to talk about delight. So this third gate, the text says, delight is a gate of Dharma illumination, for it is the mind of peace and tranquility. So the point here is that we need to be tranquil. We need to have some peace and tranquility in order to experience real delight. So it might feel like in our daily lives that thrill-seeking seems fun or seems rewarding, or after a lot of sensation. And we think that that is perhaps the path to happiness, or that is a path to real delight. But we know, because we practice, that that actually is not the way to any kind of lasting joy, any kind of lasting happiness. And also, of course, if we're agitated because we're angry, or we're fearful, or we feel upset about something, clearly that's not a time where we can experience delight, or so we think. So all of these things, this thrill-seeking, excitement, sensation, agitation, frustration, anger, we might characterize all of that as disturbance. So we can think of peace and tranquility as freedom from disturbance, whatever form that disturbance might take. So that doesn't mean that we remain perfectly still all the time, perfectly silent, perfectly somber all the time. It doesn't mean we can't dance and sing and cry and laugh and engage in whatever is happening in this moment. Whatever this moment is presenting us, this doesn't mean we can't 100% wholeheartedly engage with whatever that is. It means we can do all of those things and not be disturbed. Right in the middle of whatever's going on, we can fully participate and not be disturbed, because when we are not disturbed, we have peace. And when we have peace, then delight can arise. Naturally, delight will arise. So how do we avoid being disturbed? In some way, this might be what got us in the door to Zen practice in the first place, because we might have disturbance that we associate with suffering. So how do we manage not to be disturbed? The simple answer, it sounds simple, is to avoid grasping and judging. And of course, we hear about these things a lot in our practice. So as soon as we grab something, we give it a name. As Hojo-san often says, we decide whether it's good or bad for this one. Is this something which is good or bad for this person? And immediately we have some disturbance. Because if we've grabbed this thing and named it and said, oh, I really want this. This is a good thing for me. This is ice cream and candy and powerboat and all the things that we think we want. We go chasing after it, and we have some kind of disturbance. If we grab onto something and label it as bad, this is harmful for me, this is something I don't want in my life, we spend a lot of energy running away. trying to avoid, trying to get rid of whatever things we don't like. And again, we have disturbance. So this simple act in our human condition of encountering something, grasping it, judging it, labeling it, deciding if it's good or bad, is it weeds or flowers, creates disturbance. So that doesn't mean that we can't enjoy things. If life presents us with ice cream and candy, it doesn't mean we can't enjoy that. But can we encounter each thing as it is, as it really is, and engage with it in some appropriate way? And when the time comes, can we open the hand and let go of it and move on? We know that's not so easy. Sometimes there's something wonderful in our lives which we want to grasp onto and engage with, and we have a hard time letting go of it. Sometimes what we're being presented with is something which we find kind of painful. And still, we grasp onto it, we write stories about it, and we have a hard time letting go of it. The last time perhaps somebody said something to you which you found to be unkind, caused you some pain. Did you just let go of it and walk on and do what you had to do? Or, I mean, I do it too, we're all humans. Did you write a story about it? Why did he say that awful thing to me? Here's what I'm going to say next time I see him. I'm going to say da-da-da-da-da, right back. I write a big story about how, I'm full of righteous indignation. Have I let go of that thing? No. And yet it's causing me suffering. It's causing me disturbance. So how do we walk on in a way which is undisturbed? If we can do that, we can be delighted with whatever we're doing, or whatever is going on, or whatever this moment is presenting. This delight can arise. Why? Because we're not separating ourselves from what's happening, from what we're encountering. We're not protecting our equanimity by sort of not getting involved. And it would be easy to think that that's the way to do this, right? Well, I'm not going to be disturbed by not getting involved with the suffering I see in the world, with the pain that I see in the world. Because if I get involved with that, then I disturb my peace and tranquility, and then I don't have any delight. Is that our practice? No. We're wholeheartedly entering into this moment, whatever it contains, whatever it presents us with. We can be Jesus going into hell, and still we can have some equanimity. We can stand up straight. We can still perhaps feel some delight arise, because we can be Jesus going into hell, doing whatever we need to do for other beings, and we can still not be disturbed. That doesn't mean we don't recognize suffering. That doesn't mean we say, well, that suffering's okay. Or, well, I don't have any obligation to help. That's not what's going on. Still, somehow, we can stand up straight, and some delight can arise in a very natural way. So you may know, in addition to what I do here at Sanshin, I do some communications work for some other sanghas, one of which is Cedar Rapids Zen Center in Iowa. And one of the things that I initiated there for them was that every week on Facebook, we post a quote from their head teacher, Zico Redding, along with a photo of something happening in the center or some scenic part of the center. Mark knows because he has affiliations there. And the point of doing that was that I wanted to establish what is the identity of, and if you're thinking about going there, what does it look like? So every week there's a quote from Zico. Recently her quote was, if I can't have fun vacuuming, when will I have fun? If we don't enjoy this moment, we miss our lives. So maybe you've not seen this thing that I posted, but I have a plush, like a Tibetan monk my sister gave me a long time ago for a gift, and I set it down on my edge of my vacuum, and I shot a picture of this thing. So we have the monk sitting on the vacuum. If we can't enjoy vacuuming, when are we going to have some enjoyment? So, if I can just approach my daily tasks, whether it's something delight can arise. So in the midst of vacuuming, which I may not want to do, delight can still arise. And this is not delight, by the way, at having a clean carpet. I'm not becoming delighted because my house is clean. It's a very sticky point, isn't it? So this delight is not about looking for a silver lining and adding something into the situation to make it okay. How often in our human condition do we find ourselves making stuff okay? So we might say, well, I really hate doing this job, but it's good for me. No pain, no gain. I really hate taking out, doing the laundry, but it's good for me and I'm going to have clean socks. That's not what we're talking about. It might be very true that you'll have clean socks, and that might make you very happy. But we're not talking about that kind of delight, which is about my personal happiness. Don't get stuck there. It's easy to get stuck there. Delight is a gate of Dharma illumination, for it is the mind of peace and tranquility. So this teaching actually shows up all the time in our tradition. I'm sure this is not news to many of you, because you've all been practicing for a while. So for instance, in Dogen Zenji's Tenzo Kyokan, we find when tenzos are engaged in cooking, although they encounter coarse ingredients, they should not arouse negligence. Although they encounter delicacies, they should be all the more diligent. Therefore, to fulfill these duties for one day and one night is to delight in participating in practice. So the term that's used in the gate statement, Dharma, delight is, that term is kanki. I don't think I can reach backwards to do kanji, but I'll give you the English kanki. This is two kanjis, and they both mean joy or delight, kanki. So the term used for delight in participating in practice is slightly different. It's zui-ki. It's the same key. But this zui is like, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Yuko. This zui is has this feeling of during or while or through. So my impression of this word is it's delight that happens during something. Delight that happens when we're engaged in something. It's not delight like our personal delight or I'm happy because I have ice cream. It's the delight that arises when we're engaged in something. So it makes sense to me, this delight in participating in practice. My understanding is that this is not an uncommon general term, which is about deep gratitude or happiness. Is that kind of right?
Did you say
Zuiki?
Uncommon or common?
Common? I mean, not uncommon. This Zuiki?
We don't use that
Okay.
word.
No?
It's
I've run into it, but
Zui is Zuimok is Zui, right?
I don't know. Maybe.
It's not a common word.
Okay.
I mean, not for every day.
Okay, not for every day. It might be just.
Is.
Yes. It might be. I've only run into it in a Buddhist context. But so this wiki comes from Lotus Sutra, or we find it in the Lotus Sutra, in the chapter called The Merit of Appropriate Joy. It's a section of the sutra that describes various incidents of somebody hearing the Dharma and experiencing in a natural way some kind of delight, and then sharing that Dharma with others, or somehow getting people to come in and hear Dharma, new people to come in and hear Dharma. So there's this sharing of Dharma that happens, which is related to this delight. So, of course, when we hear some Dharma and we want to share that with others and we get others also to participate in Dharma, there's some merit attached to that, according to the sutra. So, of course, we want to propagate this Dharma. But the way this is described in the sutra is delight in participating in practice. So we see this relationship that Dogen Zenji is using in the Tenzo Kyokan. Same delight in participating in practice. So traditionally, there are 4 ways to engage with Dharma. By hearing, by teaching, by reading, and by reciting or chanting. So we have a lot of ways to work with Dharma. Any of those, during any of those, we can experience some delight. So it strikes me that when we hear the Dharma and we start to practice, we feel like there's something going on for us here. We start to see how we create suffering in ourselves and in others with our greed and anger and ignorance. We start to get some insight into how that happens. We, I hope, get a little better over time at heading off disturbance that comes from greed, anger, and ignorance, because we start to recognize it, right, when it arises, and we kind of don't get hooked, don't get hijacked. We become more peaceful and more tranquil, and more likely, perhaps, to respond to Dharma and to practice with some feeling of delight. Right? So we maybe settle down a little bit, we hear a talk, we're helping somebody else with practice, we're reading a book, reading a Dharma book, participating in a chanting service in the morning, whatever is going on, this delight can arise in a natural way. When there's a lot of static in our lives, I'm sure we all have experienced, when there's a lot of kind of static in our lives, it's harder to take in teachings, isn't it? It's harder to remember what our practice is about. It's harder to be aware of what's really arising in this moment, what's going on in our bodies and our minds, because there's all this disturbance, there's all this static happening. So it's harder for Dharma to get in somehow. We know Dharma is there, but it's harder to take it in. So when we're agitated, it's more difficult to practice. So Dharma, I think, helps us calm down, can help us calm down and experience some kind of delight. And when that happens, we take in more Dharma and we have more delight. So the more Dharma, the more delight, right? I hope it's a cycle. More Dharma, more delight. The more we settle, the more we take it in, the more we have some joy in our lives and some joy in our practice. I hope there's joy in our practice, because if not, why? What's the point? This shouldn't be about being somber all the time and not having some happiness in our practice. And it's not a personal happiness. So yes, we need to have discipline. Sometimes our practice isn't easy. Sometimes in our practice things arise which are difficult. Whether that's things in our own hearts and minds, or we have some difficult interaction with a Sangha member, or who knows. But in the midst of all that, is there joy in our practice? Is there delight in our practice? I hope so. I hope so. So again, this is not the delight that comes with, I get my personal needs met. This is a more selfless kind of delight. When we have this kind of selfless delight, we're in a much better position to take it into the world, to take it with us out of the Zendo, take it into the world, to be the bodhisattvas that we are, to help all beings, right? To do things for the benefit of other people. When tenzos are engaged in cooking, although they encounter coarse ingredients, they should not arouse negligence. Although they encounter delicacies, they should be all the more diligent. Therefore, to fulfill these duties for one day and one night is to delight in participating in practice. So to not judge ingredients, whether that's in the kitchen or in our lives, to have some equanimity while we're cooking or vacuuming or working or balancing the checkbook, anywhere in our lives, is to delight in participating in practice, because we know there is no part of our lives that does not relate to our practice, right? If I can't have fun vacuuming, when will I have fun? So if I can't have equanimity in the kitchen or in the workplace or balancing the checkbook, I have an opportunity to practice, to think about my practice. So in those moments, how do we experience delight? And how do we take that delight and turn it around for the benefit of all beings? So Hojo-san talks about delight in living by vow, where he talks about the informal meal chant. In that book, I'm sure everyone's familiar with it, but in that book, he takes a number of the chants that we do most often in this tradition, including the informal meal chant. As we take food and drink, I vow with all beings to rejoice in Zazen, being filled with delight in the Dharma. We all know this little informal meal chant. So this delight in the Dharma, not surprisingly, is Hoki, or Wana, Dharma delight. Dharma delight. Same Ho as Hoko. So Hojo-san says, when we eat, we should be happy. This happiness is the enjoyment of Dharma. We consider the taste of food to be the taste of Dharma. When we receive or eat a meal, we shouldn't grasp the taste. Usually when we eat, we encounter our food with our desires. These desires are the cause of delusion or samsara. The Buddha and Dogen Zenji teach us to become free from desires caused by objects. This is Dogen's teaching of Shinjin Datsuraku, or dropping off body and mind. Our joy when we receive food is not the fulfillment of our desire. It is the joy of Dharma and Zazen. I think this is the most essential teaching about food and eating. So in Zazen, we just observe our desires, our delusions coming up, but we don't take any action based on that. Right? We're not creating karma. We're not going out into the world with whatever our delusions are. We're simply sitting there, watching them arise. It's a great chance to, I think, create the conditions for delight to arise, because the heart and the mind kind of settle down. We have some measure of peace and tranquility. So it's a wonderful cultivating ground for us to experience some delight. Because with any luck, the static kind of ratchets down a bit. The disturbance ratchets down a bit. So we, at some point, perhaps experience this kind of genuine, selfless delight, which is an indication that we also have some degree of peace or tranquility. And to me, this is a tremendously encouraging element in our practice. Because it says to me, our natural state is a state of delight. And we don't always wake up in the morning feeling like that. Depending on what life is handing me today, it's kind of hard to get in touch with that kind of delight, and yet that delight is there. It's our natural state if we get out of our own way. So if we can settle to the point where we don't have disturbance, some delight is there. I find it tremendously encouraging in practice that that's the case. And when we have that peace and tranquility, then of course we have this Dharma gate, which is this sort of circular thing, right? We have peace and tranquility because Dharma has come in. Delight can rise. Based on delight, we continue to practice. So it makes a lot of sense to me that this third Dharma gate is delight. What would you like to say about delight or anything else that's arising in your practice, or any questions you have this morning? I'll give my voice a rest and let you talk. Please.
I was wondering, as you were talking there, how Dogen's quote about regretting the flowers fading and despising the weeds, how that, and also what you were saying about from the Tenzo Kyokun about the ingredients, how that kind of ties into this point of delight.
Certainly, because we see lovely flowers and a form of delight arises, right? And yet we see weeds and we think, gosh darn it, I got to go pull weeds. And those weeds are ugly. They've got thorns and they've got spike bits and they're not pretty. So how can we encounter the weeds and the flowers, the coarse ingredients and the fine ingredients, and whatever this moment is presenting, without craving and aversion, without grasping, without attachment, so that we don't have disturbance. So we can certainly look at those weeds and say, well, I better put on the to-do list. I need to go out and do the weeding. And it's not my favorite job without some kind of judging and labeling and writing a story. So of course it would be easy to say, well, if I pull the weeds, it's a good thing and delight will arise because I will have a weed-free garden. This is also not it, right? Don't get stuck. This is one of those teachings that on a very broad level, I mean, intellectually it makes sense. Well, okay, I'm going to see something pretty and I'm not going to attach to it. I'm going to see something ugly and I'm not going to push it away. And this is where we begin, and this is important. But we know the more we sit with this and the more we practice with this, it becomes a much more and more subtle teaching. How do I encounter these things and not label them and not make them okay? Because my human condition is I want to make it okay. So when I was practicing at Shogoji, it was the first time, this some years back, it was the first time I'd ever practiced in a training temple in Japan. And it was tough. I mean, because it was my first time. I was still figuring it out. Didn't speak the language, didn't know how to do anything, And I thought there were many, and I happened to be there during the rainy season, so it was like living under a waterfall. Seriously, it was like living on morning, noon, and night, water pouring out of the sky. You would wash things and they would mildew before they dried. I mean, you were just in this constant state of damp. And so the sky was dark because it was raining. And it was hard to be there. I was physically exhausted. And I remember thinking at the time, boy, this is, if there was a jet plane in the front yard, I'd be on it. I'd out of here. And the next moment I thought, well, but, it's really okay because this is good for me. Something's good happening for me here, even though this is really hard. It was years before I realized how I got stuck there. I didn't have to make that okay. I was trying so hard to make it. I was trying to justify, the time that I was spending there. Because, what if I went home and talked about this and I said it was really tough, and people said, well, why'd you waste your time doing that? I had to have something to say, I had to make it all right. It was years before I realized, oh no, I was young in my practice. I didn't have to make that okay. It was completely fine that it was what it was. It was completely fine that I was tired. It was completely fine that I got discouraged. That was all right. I was at that point unable to not make that okay. We spend an awful lot of time in our lives and a lot of energy, and we don't realize it until we kind of begin to see what we're doing. We spend a lot of time making stuff okay. Trying to justify things or reconcile ourselves to things. And that's our human condition. That's all right. We can't beat ourselves up for that. But can we notice when we're doing it? It's a really subtle thing. Once we start to notice it, then we start to notice how much we do it. Well, it'll be okay because ultimately something good will happen. Well, maybe. But can we approach the weeds and the flowers and not get stuck in that really subtle place? It's very interesting. It's very interesting. What else would you like to say this morning? Please.
I'll just offer some personal stuff. Back in my hippie days, there was a cartoonist, R. Crumb, and he had these great cartoons. I still have them around here and there, but one of his characters, cartoon characters, was Mr. Natural. And I just remember, being a bachelor and really hating to do my dishes and do my laundry and, just the typical kinds of things. Well, Mr. Natural walks into the kitchen and there are piles of dishes everywhere. And he's grumpy and he's just, I just don't want to get into this. And he just dives in and he just starts going at it. Next cell you see is, he's whistling, he's just enjoying the activity of doing that and ending up with the, he wasn't going for, I've got to clean up the kitchen, I'll be happy when that's done. It's just enjoying that activity. And I know we do this all the time. I do it in my work because there are things that I have no idea how I'm going to do them, how I'm going to fix them. Our washing machine went on the fritz last week, right when my wife got home. I knew she was going to have laundry and all that stuff to deal with, so I just was, if you saw our basement, it's not the friendliest place. It has a brick floor, there are snakes that live down there, and rodents, and so I had to pull the whole business out. It's a new modern thing, it has a computer in it, and it was telling me had this error code coming up, and it just wouldn't go. I had to dismantle the entire machine to get down to a little spot where mice had gotten into the washer and had chewed the insulation off of the wire and chewed another wire completely loose. So, I knew I could fix that, put it back together. And I just realized that I just forgot about being down there with my nose in the grimy floor and the mouse poop everywhere, And all of a sudden it's done, and it's good. The other thing is, one of my Dharma grandfathers is Daizan Mizumi Roshi of LAZC. He wrote a book, Appreciating Your Life, which is a collection of his talks. It's Appreciate Your Life. And that, just saying that to myself sometimes allows me to kind of get through that point of resistance and just engage, chopping the wood and carrying the water and shoveling the snow, and realizing that all of a sudden there's just delight in whatever the activity is. It's that moving around, and it's getting past that lethargy that you can find sometimes right before you have to engage in an activity. So I guess that's all I have to say.
Thank you. So your Jizo going into hell to fix your washing machine.
Literally.
Jizo going into hell. Isn't it interesting when we discover that making something okay is not about adding something in to a situation? We don't have to write a story and add a story in to make that situation okay. We have to perhaps take things away to make it okay. You know, because when we want to make something okay, we want to look for that silver lining while we're creating something, throwing it into the pot, you know, which is still only our own idea. The fact that we have to make it okay is our own idea. And I mean, it's this idea on top of idea. Can we stop? Can we back up and say, you know, what's really going on here? Can I just see and engage with that? And then this, as you say, this delight naturally arises. And it's not that I need to look at, oh, how pretty the sun is shining on my moldy whatever. No. Because that's still my idea. It's just, here it is. Can I just do this? And if I can do this in a selfless way, delight arises. So, yeah, absolutely. Can I just wash dishes and not worry about the rest of it? It's not so easy. It's not so easy. What else would you like to say this morning about this or anything else? Coming up for you, please.
Well, you just said what I was about to say, which is when you said it's not so easy. To me, this is the absolutely most difficult part of trying to practice. And I fail at it all the time.
As do we all.
And it just, it keeps getting to me that I can't seem to figure out how to make this happen. When there's a troubling situation, not to just get carried away in the agitation and the negative effects and so on and so forth, and just be with it. I find that pretty much impossible most of the time.
Well, we all get hijacked. That's our human condition. It may be that the more we practice and the more we settle, the earlier in that process we notice we're getting hijacked. We might not be able to prevent being hijacked. We might notice it just a fraction of a second earlier, you know, so that we can stop, step back and say, you know, what's really happening here? I think we can't beat ourselves up for getting carried away sometimes. That's the human condition, you know. We're sort of predisposed to some of that. But can we notice it early? And can we notice it early before perhaps we take an action we regret? There might be agitation happening here, but can I notice that before I go out and do something about it? You know? It's certainly difficult, can be certainly difficult not to get carried away, which I think is why this practice is a lifelong practice. You know, we don't sit down once and get it. And even if I head it off today and I do pretty well today, tomorrow I'm going to be right back because again, it's just the human condition. So I think every time we catch ourselves doing something, seeing some habituated pattern, here it is again, every time we break a precept, this is what vow and repentance is about, right? This is why we say, you know, I recognize I did something less than skillful. I vow in the next moment, I'll watch out for it, you know, and in the next moment, and in the next moment, and just like the zazen, you know, we keep coming back and coming back. Vow and repentance is about that, you know, we keep coming back. Sometimes the most difficult thing is not to give up, because we can become discouraged. But again, can we meet that without grabbing it and saying, this is bad, I'm a bad practitioner, write the story. Can we simply say, you know, in the next moment, I'm going to keep doing my best, and the next. I think it's helpful to recognize we're all practicing something. We're all hijacked by something. We're all unskillful about something. That's why we need Sangha. You know, that's why we have to help each other. To walk this path by ourselves is incredibly difficult. You know, the fact that you're here and you come on regularly on Sunday is important. The fact that you're willing to share your own practice and your challenges in your practices. You know, the fact that somebody hears you say, this is my challenge, is reassuring for everybody. This is how we help each other. This is how we build community. This is why community is important. So I appreciate both of you, sharing your own experience. I think that's an important part of practice. So please keep going. Please keep going. Please help me too. What else this morning? I don't have a timepiece, but I'm assuming we're probably at time we should.
Yeah, we're close.
Okay.
Close enough.
Okay. Thank you very much.
These are the truths I vow